Late last year, Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson made headlines for their incident and confrontation at Las Vegas. Both were also among numerous drivers complaining throughout the year that hits in the new next-gen car were harder than anything previously experienced. As we now know, they were bigger, caused concussions, and NASCAR committed to making changes this offseason to reduce the effects of rear impacts. On Sunday, after the clash at the Coliseum, both drivers talked about the first race and had eye-opening remarks to say about impacts in the car, and it's not good. Last year, it was just 5 races into the 2022 Cup Series season in the new next-gen car when Bubba Wallace sent up a red flag after a nasty crash on the last lap at Atlanta.
That was hard. That was hard to say to have had. So I think that was harder than Pocono.
His words were alarming to anyone who remembered his terrifying crash at Pocono. Unbelievably, at the next race on a track bigger than a mile at Talladega, Wallace sounded off yet again. "There's a new P1, he said. "I don't know if I can take any more effing hits like that." What we later learned is Wallace wasn't alone in his perspective. Numerous other drivers spoke up and complained about harder than normal impacts, including Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, and Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, it's been a rough week for me. It's been a pretty sore week. I'm not moving as fast as I typically do, but it seems like I can still drive the car fast, at least in practice, so that part's good. But yeah, these cars, they hit harder than ever. They hit really, really hard. They're super solid, and it hurts.
The drivers and their words were one thing. Concussions were something altogether different. When Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman were sidelined due to concussions from rear impacts, the drivers had heard and seen enough from NASCAR, united, and publicly called out the sanctioning body at Talladega in October. A week later, officials began holding weekly meetings with the drivers. Through those meetings, the governing body received feedback and began formulating a plan to address the situation. Due to the delayed timing of NASCAR's response, changes wouldn't be implemented until the 2023 season. Sunday night in California, drivers had their first chance to feel the effect of the changes. Wallace had a fast number 23 Toyota, flashed that speed in the first half, and headed into the intermission with the lead. In the second half, Wallace lost the lead but remained up front and within striking distance of the leaders. However, that all changed with 7 laps to go, when Austin Dillon ran out of patience following a couple of laps of hard beating and banging with the 2311 racing car and sent Wallace for a spin, the back of his car hitting the wall. Following the race, Wallace talked about the incident with Dillon and recognized it was all a product of racing on the quarter-mile track. It was at the end of his conversation with reporters that he made a couple of alarming statements.
How did you feel about this car and the way the week went for you?
Back still hurts. Head still hurts.
But Wallace wasn't alone. Kyle Larson was asked about the impacts of the car during his post-race press conference and echoed those same feelings.
I only had like one moment last year that I remember where it was like, wow, like that was a hard hit. I think we stacked up on a restart at like Sonoma or something, and this was like every restart. You would check up for the guy in front of you and just get clobbered from behind, then your head just whipping around and slamming off the back of the seat. So I don't have a headache, but I can see how if others do. I mean it's no surprise because it was very violent for the majority of the race.
Very violent on a quarter-mile track. On Monday, Wallace's team co-owner Denny Hamlin addressed the subject during the first episode of his Actions Detrimental podcast.
Again, it doesn't take much to really get these cars kind of out of shape when you start bumper tagging. Speaking of which, man, the bumper tag still hurts. Like, I don't feel anything softer. I know that that's something that NASCAR might be still testing is softer bumpers itself. Man, we need it really bad. Like, I mean, once you start bumper tagging into corners, like your Hans locks out and you can feel a jar in your head.
Jarring the head, Hans locking. Very violent. Those don't sound like improvements. And what's most concerning is this occurred on the shortest track with the lowest speeds the drivers will race on all year. Next up is the Daytona 500, and we all know about those speeds and how it always includes a big one or two. Wallace, Larson, and Hamlin's comments certainly aren't what NASCAR wants to hear. But if the sanctioning body cares about its drivers as much as it claimed at the end of last season, it will try and expedite its research and better understand why the impacts are still so violent and jarring, and hopefully fix it sooner rather than later.